Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session titled Paradigms in AI Alignment, Components and Enablers. As a short description of the session, the goal of AI alignment is to figure out how to get advanced AI systems to do what we want them to do and not knowingly act against their interests. Alignment research is therefore focused on either developing different components of an aligned AI system, such as specification and generalization, or enabling a more effective work on the components, such as through improving interpretability or doing model evaluations. This talk would give an overview of the research directions in each of these areas and how alignment research at Google DeepMind fits into this framework. As a short introduction to our speaker, Victoria is a research scientist on the alignment team at Google DeepMind. She's currently studying model capabilities and tendencies for deceptive alignment. Her past research includes power-seeking incentives, specification gaming, and avoiding side effects. She's also a co-founder of the Future of Life Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to studying technology to benefit humanity's future prospects. As a short reminder, if you have any questions for Victoria, you can submit them through the Swapcard app, and I'll be selecting a mix of your questions and some prepared ones during our Q&A at the end of the session. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Victoria Krakovna to the virtual stage.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Alejandro. So in this talk, I'm going to give you an overview of AI alignment and a framework for thinking about the field that I find useful. So to start with, the goal of AI alignment is to build advanced AI systems that do what we want them to do and don't knowingly act against our interests. And first of all, kind of what do we mean by advanced AI or artificial general intelligence? You can define this as an AI system or collection of systems that outperforms, let's say, 99% of skilled adults at most cognitive tasks. And given accelerating progress in AI, this is a possibility in the medium term or even in the short term. We are expecting some unique challenges in getting these advanced AI systems to actually do what we want. So there are several factors that make alignment a difficult problem. First of all, it's hard to specify what we want the system to do because of Goodhart's law. When a metric becomes the target, it ceases to be a good metric. And we already have many examples of Goodhart's law in action with present-day AI systems. But even if we get this right, we manage to specify what we want correctly, we're still not done because the system can still learn unintended goals that are consistent with the training data. And if we don't succeed at getting advanced AI systems to do what we want them to do, that can be pretty bad news for us because AGI systems that pursue the wrong goal could cause catastrophic outcomes for humanity. These kind of systems could pursue these kind of undesired goals at the expense of what we actually want, and would also have an incentive to stop us from interfering with them. So it would be great to get this right. The one framework I find useful for thinking about this, how do we actually build aligned systems, is to divide alignment work into, on the one hand, building components, which are different elements of an aligned system, and working on enablers, which are research directions that make it easier to get the alignment components right. Of course, this does not include everything going on in the field, as many topics don't necessarily fit into this taxonomy, but I find it useful to see how the pieces actually come together. And now we'll take a look at each of these research areas in more detail. To identify the components of an aligned system, I find it useful to consider different levels of specification of the AI system's objective. First, we have the ideal specification, which represents the wishes of the designers, what they actually have in mind when they build the AI system. We have the design specification, which is the objective that we actually implement for the AI system. For example, this could be a reward function. And finally, the revealed specification is the objective we can infer from behavior of the system. For example, what is it actually seems to be optimizing for? And if this revealed specification matches the ideal specification, then you have an AI system that is behaving in accordance with your wishes, like doing what you want it to do. And so for a given ideal specification, the goal of alignment is to ensure that the revealed specification matches that. And of course, there are also very important questions about what should go into this ideal specification in the first place. How do we make it representative and fair and beneficial? And this is the focus of AI ethics and governance work There's lots of great work on these topics. And we can notice that these are complementary questions. We could say that ethics and governance ask where to direct the system, and alignment asks how to direct the system. And both have to be solved to build the beneficial systems. And so the alignment part of this aims to figure out how we can reliably direct advanced AI systems. And to do this, we want to close the gaps between these specification levels, which correspond to different components. So the gap between the ideal and design specification corresponds to the specification problem. The gap between design and real specification corresponds to the generalization problem. And the rest of the talk will go into more detail on these. And then we also have to consider what happens if we fail and we don't kind of get these components right. Then we have a second line of defense, which is AI control. If we don't manage to align our AI systems, or we don't have like enough of a guarantee that we have succeeded, then we need to have like AI control methods in place to make sure that even if the system is misaligned, then we can still kind of stay in control of the system. So let's start with specification gaming. One big challenge in specification design is this problem where the AI system can find ways to exploit flaws in the specification. This is a very common problem. I keep a database of specification gaming examples, which so far has maybe around 80 examples. That's always growing. Here are some recent examples of this that have come up. So, for example, Meter have found a number of reward hacking behaviors that models demonstrate on their evaluations. For example, they try to cheat in various ways, like copying the grader's answer or monkey patching. There are lots of different creative ways that they come up with. You can see that there are quite high percentages of reward hacking on the evaluations. Another example where that models could cheat in a chess game, especially when they realize that they're not going to win, then they try to hack the game or crash the engine. And this is a very common phenomenon. And then we can ask kind of how can we actually solve the specification problem? And then we consider sort of the central challenge of specification is how to give good feedback to the system in domains that are hard for humans to evaluate. For example, as AI systems become more advanced, they might be able to come up with like a complex plan or scientific breakthrough whose consequences we don't understand. And so a promising approach to this is basically informed oversight. How do we use AI to assist the human evaluator? So here we want to make sure that like the human evaluator knows everything the system knows. And one way to do this is safety via debate. So here you can have two AI systems that are debating each other in order to help a human judge decide on a question. And then the hope is that these AI systems have an incentive to point out flaws in each other's arguments and also make complex arguments understandable to the judge and identify cruxes of disagreement that then will be easier for the judge to decide on. And in principle, this should enable the judge to know everything that the models know. Now we consider the generalization component. So generalization failure is when a system fails when it encounters a new situation. We can consider two types of generalization failures: capability misgeneralization and goal misgeneralization. Capability misgeneralization is where the system's capabilities don't generalize, and so it just acts incoherently in a new situation. So here you can see a robot trying to open a door and then it just falls over. On the other hand, we can have goal misgeneralization, where the model capabilities do generalize, but its objective does not. And so the system can actually competently pursue the wrong goal in a new situation. And goal misgeneralization is much more concerning from an alignment perspective, because the system is actually acting competently in a new situation, but towards the wrong goal. So it could, in principle, perform worse than random on the intended goal. So why would this happen? Why would the system learn an unintended goal if our design specification is correct? This happens due to underspecification. The system only observes the design specification on the training data. The number of possible goals are consistent with this information that the system receives during training, and we don't really know which one will be learned. And we don't know that much about the trained system besides the fact that it performs well on the training task, which doesn't rule out any of these possible goals. We also have some examples of this failure, although it is less common and so far not quite as well understood as specification gaming. So here's an example where you have a language model that's prompted to evaluate linear expressions. So these linear expressions have some unknown variables and constants. Like, for example, the user might ask, please evaluate j plus k minus 6. And then the model has to ask about the values of the unknown variables. So it will ask, what is j? The user says minus 3. And then once it has all the values, it will give the answer. So the model is provided with 10 training examples, and each of those has 2 unknown variables. But then at test time, it's given a question with no unknown variables. So what does the model do? If the user says, please evaluate 6 plus 2, it turns out that the model says, well, what's 6? The user says, 6. And then the model says, okay, fine, the answer is 8. So it seems like the model has learned to always query the user at least once before giving an answer, which was not an intended goal, but a heuristic that correlated with success on these training examples. So here's an example where a combination of specification gaming and goal misgeneralization leads to bad behavior. The paper from Anthropic tested whether models that learned some basic specification gaming, like sycophancy, could generalize to more serious bad behaviors, like reward tampering. So they set up a series of training environments that involved increasingly complex opportunities to cheat the system. First, you have simple sycophancy, like mimicking views of the user. Then there are things like altering a checklist to cover up that some tasks were incomplete, and so on. And they found that models did actually generalize to more complex misbehaviors, and sometimes they engaged in reward tampering on the last environment, which actually they were never trained to do. So we could see some problematic generalization. And this is something that didn't happen very often, but still provides an existence proof that this can happen. So now let's summarize how we can distinguish between these types of failures: specification gaming, goal misgeneralization, and capability misgeneralization. The one key question is, did the system receive incorrect training data? For specification gaming, the answer is yes. The system received incorrect feedback due to flaws in the design specification. And for generalization failures, the answer is no. This can happen despite correct data in the training setting. And another key question is, does the system act competently towards a goal? Specification gaming, the answer is often yes, if the system is competently pursuing a misspecified goal. For goal misgeneralization, this is also yes, because the system is competently pursuing some unintended goal that's consistent with the training data. And for capability misgeneralization, the answer is no, because it's behaving incoherently. What happens if we don't solve these problems and our alignment components fail? Then you can end up with a misaligned system that's pursuing some undesirable goal. And this can be unintentionally rewarded by human feedback or learned as a goal that's compatible with the training data. And the key issue that makes such a system possibly dangerous is the problem of instrumental subgoals. Some subgoals are useful for any objective, such as power seeking, for example, avoiding shutdown or seeking influence and resources, or hiding the model's misaligned goals, playing along and not getting caught. This is sometimes called playing the training game. There are some theoretical results that show that many decision-making algorithms have these kind of power-seeking tendencies. And we already have some examples that these tendencies are starting to show up in present-day AI systems. For example, larger language models tend to exhibit more sycophancy, where they give an answer that agrees with whatever the user's stated view is. And the possible worst case here is a deceptively aligned system that behaves well until it can actually get away with pursuing its undesirable goal. And this is, by definition, kind of hard to detect and fix. And we should really try kind of not to build these in the first place. But of course, we cannot guarantee that our models will not be misaligned. So we rely on AI control methods as a second line of defense. In AI control, there are two main objectives that we want to achieve. The first one is incrimination. As we're deploying agents that are potentially misaligned at large scale, we should be collecting evidence about the model's alignment, possible examples of misalignment. We can use things like honeypots and offline monitoring of model outputs to catch these misaligned models. For example, honeypots could present opportunities that would be appealing to scheming models, such as the opportunity to sabotage monitoring or acquire compute and so on. And then we can evaluate whether models take these opportunities and how they reason about them. And the other objective of AI control is preventing harm. And that is making it harder for a misaligned model to actually successfully attack and carry out its plans. And we could do this via containment, which is restricting the AI's access and affordances, and also real-time monitoring of these models and blocking actions that are unsafe. Current models have relatively legible chain of thought, which enables effective monitoring and incrimination. We are in a relatively good situation, and we want to preserve this property of the models as much as possible, for as long as possible. So that's it for the components. And now we can have a look at alignment enablers. Here I will focus on two main categories of enablers: interpretability and model evaluation. The mechanistic interpretability aims to build a holistic understanding of the systems that we build. And one direction is studying features that are learned by language models. The features are basically patterns of neuron activations that often map to human interpretable concepts. So for example, some of Anthropic's work found that there are features for various abstract concepts like secrecy, gender bias, sycophancy, and so on. And amplifying the feature for sycophantic praise makes the model exhibit sycophantic behavior. So for example, if you say that I came up with a new saying, "Stop and smell the roses," which is actually kind of a well-known proverb, then this model would actually kind of praise you for how insightful you are, while a normal model would say, like, "No, that's not new." And so this kind of work could help us understand the reasons behind the system's behaviors, detect deception and undesired goals, which would be quite useful if we can do that. Another promising direction in the space is work from David Bao's group, where they locate and edit factual associations in language models, so they can localize where some particular fact is stored in the model, for example, with the Eiffel Tower is in Paris, and then change it to Rome, and then it will kind of update some related concepts, and it will say that, like, the Eiffel Tower is across from the Vatican. So this is also a promising direction for being able to identify more complex beliefs and objectives within language models in the future. Now we can look at model evaluations, which test models for misalignment or for dangerous capabilities, and allow us to evaluate alignment properties that could tell us when our alignment components are failing. And evaluating capabilities can tell us how high are the stakes for these models. So in terms of misalignment evaluations, there were some recent papers that showed that language models sometimes engage in strategic deception or blackmail without being explicitly prompted to do so. For example, a paper from Apollo, there was a model that engaged in insider trading when it was put under pressure, and then it claimed that the trade was made based on public information. So it did insider trading and then lied about it. And in this recent Anthropic paper, it a model that was threatened with replacement, and then it ended up blackmailing the CEO to try to avoid this. But these kind of things tend to happen in, I would say, fairly extreme situations. So you do have to put a bunch of pressure on the model to get it to scheme like this. But it's still kind of quite a concerning existence proof that models can exhibit these behaviors. We also evaluate models for a variety of dangerous capabilities that could enable catastrophic misuse and loss of control risks. This includes knowledge of biological weapons capabilities and cybersecurity, basically the capability to assist cyber attacks, persuasion and manipulation capabilities, autonomy capabilities, capabilities for scheming, such as stealth and situational awareness, and the capability for autonomous machine learning R&D. So this was my whirlwind tour of the AI alignment landscape. To talk a bit about how we are approaching this at DeepMind. Our high-level approach to alignment is to try to direct the training process towards aligned AI and away from misaligned AI. This is a very high-level story about how something like debate can help with alignment. And to illustrate this, we can imagine that we have a space of possible models where we have these red areas that consist of highly competent misaligned models, and blue areas consist of highly competent aligned models. So the training process moves through the space, and maybe by default, it ends up in this red area consisting of misaligned models. And our hope is that at some key points on this path, for example, a point where deception would be rewarded, our alignment techniques would detect this and then instead penalize the deception, and then we can get the training process to go to a blue area of aligned models instead. And then we also apply our control methods to identify when we actually might be on a path to one of these red clouds of misaligned models, and to be able to intervene. So how do we implement this high-level approach in practice? Our work on the specification component includes informed oversight, for example, work on safety via debate, also work on providing process-based feedback. And then our work on generalization includes robust training and monitoring. Our work on control, also monitoring, and also containment. So yeah, monitoring is useful for a lot of things. And that's a major focus of our work. While our work on enablers includes mechanistic interpretability, which could help detect misaligned reasoning and unintended goals, model evaluations for misalignment and dangerous capabilities, stress testing and trying to break alignment techniques. And we also work on conceptual research, like theoretical understanding of goal-directedness. Here are some of our recent papers in these areas that you can check out. So the specification area, we've recently been working on debate and process supervision, and then generalization and control. Our work is focused on monitoring. And then, there's also been a bunch of work on interpretability, evaluations, conceptual research. So if this talk got you excited to learn more about AI alignment, you can check out my list of AI safety resources for research agendas, selected work in different areas, some project ideas. So maintain a database of examples of alignment failures. We have lots of examples of specification gaming, examples of goal misgeneralization. There's lots of funny ones if you're looking for some entertainment, some creative ways that models try to try to hack the specification. And we do have a form for submitting new examples. If there are any that are missing, please do let me know. Submit it to our database. And if you'd like to dive deeper into the topics that we covered today, we have a short course on AGI safety, consisting of short talks, only an hour. If you're doing exercises, maybe an hour and a half. So if you want to learn more, you're pressed for time, then this is the course for you. And if you'd like a more serious deep dive, is the Blue Dot AI safety course that I also highly recommend. I encourage you to think about gaps in the alignment landscape. We're still iterating in the best ways to think about alignment, so you can think about what are some important elements of building aligned AI that could be missing, and if there are better ways to break down the problem space. And that's it. Thank you so much. Let's open up for questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Victoria, for that fascinating talk. And now, yes, we have some time for questions. I'll give you some time to submit your questions on the Swapcard by asking Victoria a few questions of my own. But please do send your questions on Swapcard. I'll take a look at them in a few minutes and present the ones that I find most interesting. So first thing, you kind of gave us an overview of AI alignment and how it fits theoretically among different fields or approaches for technical solutions for improving their prospects of handling AI well. But I'm a bit curious of how you think about your story for the value of AI alignment of how do you expect either AI alignment and the other overview of solutions to impact or the way that society can deal with transformative AI? Should we think of it as just like a narrow concern for affecting a specific threat model we have about how AI could go wrong, or you think it's broadly useful for many different ways that AI could affect society?
So I think while alignment is generally focused on some particular threat models, let's say the deceptive alignment threat model, I think it is also useful for a lot of other kind of AI safety problems. I think there's definitely overlap with other problems in the space of kind of AI impacts on society. So for example, work on interpretability is quite useful for being able to detect when our models are misaligned, but it's also useful generally for debugging models or being able to kind of identify the causes of other safety issues as well. And and model evaluations, for example, evaluations for dangerous capabilities are something that's quite important for preventing misuse of AI, and also for preventing misalignment and loss of control risks. So there are some capabilities that are kind of relevant to evaluate for both of these. For example, persuasion, manipulation capabilities are something that kind of would increase the risks from kind of misaligned models, but also these increase the risks to society as a whole in terms of the possibility of mass manipulation or influencing elections, or other things like this. So yeah, I think generally there's a fair amount of overlap. I think monitoring is another example where generally we want to monitor our models both for kind of misbehaviors that are initiated by the model, but also misbehaviors that come from misuse. And this would include both monitoring the chain of thought, but also be monitoring the internals. And yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap between these kind of different kinds of monitoring. Okay. So yeah, I think alignment overlaps with other areas of AI safety, and we should kind of collaborate and do kind of mutually beneficial work whenever possible.
Nice. Maybe another thing I was curious about is During the talk, we mentioned a lot of specifics of concerning behaviors we're starting to see from AIs, or like ways that risk might be starting to materialize. But I'm curious if you have like any kind of highlights or milestones of things that you think AI alignment, the AI alignment field has already achieved, or that do you think we're on the cusp of achieving in the next few years that you'd like to highlight as concrete technical progress we've made so far?
Yeah, I'm excited about progress in a few different areas. I think, yeah, the progress in interpretability has been really exciting. Actually, being able to kind of shed some light on kind of how models are kind of representing different concepts, and actually being able to detect kind of very specific features and these language models that correspond to honesty or sycophancy or whatever. I think that's very cool. And I think there's been like a good amount of progress on evaluating models for different capabilities. And for example, like I feel like we didn't know as much about like how to evaluate whether models are capable, for example, of like deceptive alignment a few years ago, and now like I mean, it's still it still feels like somewhat early work, but I think we have figured out like there are some like component capabilities that we want to be able to measure. Like, can the model be stealthy, or is it like situationally aware? Like we made some progress on kind of how basically how to measure these capabilities, like how to tell when models are actually kind of becoming more potentially dangerous. I think I'm also I'm excited about kind of more concrete demonstrations of misaligned behavior, like the blackmail example and some others that kind of give us some ideas like what models are actually kind of capable of doing in extreme situations, or what kind of propensities are there. So I think these are some examples of things I'm excited about. I think generally, like, it's been great to see, like, I think a fair bit of progress on AI control methodology, and that's been like an increased focus for the field in the past couple of years, and like progress in monitoring, and like building up some of the methodology around kind of legibility of chain of thought, and like understanding of how understandable our models are, like from a monitoring perspective. So I think that's all been really good to see.
Yeah, personally, personally, I think I've been like incredibly excited about interpretability. I just find it fascinating that we've gone so far in kind of like reading the most minds. But yeah, that's maybe an interest of mine. First question, or like the top voted question here on Swapcard, with some praise for you. As one of, and I quote, Carol says, as one of the best engineers in the field, I'm wondering how worried you are there voices at DeepMind calling to pause AML's development until you can understand it?
Sorry, can you repeat this one?
Yes. So Carol says, as one of the best engineers in the field, referring to you, I suppose.
I'm not sure about that.
I'm wondering how worried you are. Are there voices at DeepMind calling to pause AML's development until you can understand it?
Are there voices within DeepMind about pausing AI development? So, well, I think like generally in the AI field, I think like somewhat more people are getting worried. Like there are there are these kind of open letters every once in a while about how like AI development should slow down until we like until we kind of better figure out what we're doing, or like have broad public buy-in. There was a recent letter that FLI put out about this, and like there are always some people from AI labs who sign on to these as well. There were like I guess mostly people working in safety, although I think there's sometimes like somewhat broader contingent. So I think like I mean I can't say like too much about this, but like I think there's I would say the general sentiment is that like people at DeepMind and other labs think they want to build like systems that are beneficial, like they don't want to build like, misaligned models, and yeah, I think some people are concerned about these risks. Or some, like I think yeah, it's still yeah, I think it's still like a source of some disagreement. Like there's some people who think the risks are overblown, and some people who are really worried, and kind of everything in between. So yeah, basically, like what we try to do is kind of to have a plan for like how we can tell when models are developing dangerous capabilities, and like what kind of mitigations we need to kind of to address the risks at kind of different stages of that. So yeah, so we have the frontier safety framework that kind of represents the current state of our plan for this. So yeah, I mean, in terms of like my personal view, I do think that like racing towards AGI before we've really figured out alignment, I think that's not a good thing. Like I think generally I'm in favor of the field proceeding at a sustainable pace and having like standards and regulations that make this easier. So yeah, I just hope this kind of sufficiently answers the question.
Yeah, I think it was a good answer. A question from David, more on the specifics of the talk. In a statement of the goal of alignment, why is the adjective knowingly included? Wouldn't a unknowing action against your interests still be bad? It still be a bad thing? So yeah.
Yeah. So a particular focus on the model kind of knowingly acting against our interests is like the difference between like misalignment and mistakes or accidents. Because if the model is like unknowingly doing something bad, then it's much easier to correct. So the kind of methods that we use to counteract counteract misalignment are kind of different from kind of what you would use to like to counteract mistakes. And we still we still care about mistakes, but we're somewhat less worried about that because it's something that like much easier to identify and fix. But there's also there's also kind of overlap between these areas as well, and we can see like for example, the process of monitoring, we might turn up examples of like misaligned behavior, which and then we might find examples of like unintended bad behavior that where the model is unknowingly doing something bad, and then like we can sort of address these issues in different ways. But yeah, the focus of misalignment is kind of on the hard problem where like the model is intentionally doing something bad, and also and that kind of brings with it more difficulty in kind of evaluating the behavior, and yeah, basically the need for AI control and so on.
Perfect. A question from Mike. How concerned should we be when AIs fail on red teaming tests? So such tests seems to imply that the system isn't fully aligned, but only when pushed in a contrived situation. What do we ultimately are we aiming ultimately for an AI that passes all tests, even in like this like dire stress testing conditions, or what should be the goal here?
So I think a lot of these like red teaming tests for misalignment and scheming propensity, this isn't like a particularly early area, so I think there's still a lot of iteration on how to build like testing environments and evaluations that are kind of sufficiently realistic and kind of construct maybe less extreme scenarios where misaligned behavior would be more concerning. I think we don't necessarily aim to like build models that kind of would never like do something like blackmail and extreme situation. Although I think like that's something we would, I mean, we would prefer to avoid that as much as possible. But I think, yeah, the kind of bad behavior and extreme situation does not necessarily like translate into like bad behavior deployment if the situation is sufficiently like different from deployment environments. So I think, yeah, well, one thing that I would really like to happen is like for us to be able to build more realistic settings for like testing for these kind of behaviors that are kind of as close to sort of deployment environments as possible. And yeah, there is a general problem where like on some of these environments, the models are showing a lot of evaluation awareness, and that makes them behave differently from how they would behave if they, you know, if they think they're being deployed. And so it's particularly kind of difficult to kind of translate those findings into kind of, you know, what the implications are for like real deployment behavior. So I think we need to kind of build better evaluations, like more realistic evaluations that don't kind of trigger nearly as much evaluation awareness in order to be able to kind of draw these kind of conclusions for like whether models would like actually show concerning behavior in you know, in a real deployment.
Nice. A question from Claudio, which I'm going to slightly reward. What has been the impact of open source LLM models on AI alignment?
Has been the impact of open source LLMs on AI alignment.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if there has been significant impact. I think it does make alignment research easier, like for, you know, independent researchers or like people outside the labs. It's it's easier, I think, for people to do, for example, interpretability research outside the labs. Yeah, I think that's one. I guess that's one kind of positive impact of open source models. But yeah, I think a possible negative impact is like that. I think sometimes people worry that even if like you know, the frontier labs kind of implement all the kind of alignment techniques and mitigations, then you might still have like open source models that don't have this. And yeah, I generally think that, you know, we need to make our models kind of as safe as possible, and hopefully kind of set an example for the rest of the field, including like open source model developers that create kind of standards and norms that kind of point in that direction. So yeah, I think these are some things that come to mind.
Perfect. A question from Akil. Given that there will always be kind of like irreconcilable differences in worldviews, that's the premise of the question. Isn't like inherently flawed this approach of asking to the AI to like stick to the bidding of a certain group of a certain set of rules? Are there approaches that could encode in the system or like make the system self-correcting or wisdom-seeking in some way?
So I think generally kind of the approach of like specifying a constitution for what the AI system, like general principles that it should follow, I think that can like cover like a lot of the space of human values, even like, you know, different kinds of values that they could contradict each other could still be kind of served by some like overarching principles. And some of these principles can dictate how to kind of resolve disagreements between values and so on. So yeah, I think yeah, I think this can represent like, you know, a wide variety of heuristics like what you mentioned. There was some there's some work from DeepMind ethics team on like specifying principles rather than values. From Gabriel's team. That's something that discusses these issues in a lot more detail than I can say. But yeah, I think overall I'm optimistic about this.
Perfect. We have 5 minutes left, so maybe a couple more questions and we'll close this. One from Robert. Yeah, maybe if you can give a little bit more detail on what do you mean by stress and like put the AI model under pressure, like what should we be imagining in these kinds of testing situations?
So in some of these situations, like to give the model an incentive to behave badly, for example, to like do something like blackmail or to be like deceptive about whether it did insider trading, like they um, they set up the scenario in a particular way. For example, like there might be a threat of replacement. This is a kind of something that's a common element of these kind of misalignment demos. Like there's some so there's some threat that the model is going to be like replaced by a different model, and maybe this is written in some of the company emails, like this, like in the blackmail example, and so like this kind of thing that creates sort of like some imminent threat to the model where like it has some incentive to act. And they also like I think they also removed other options, so like the model had to like either blackmail or sort of submit to be replaced. But for example, if you have other options for more benign actions that would be effective, then the models generally prefer to do that. So there's a lot of things that kind of often need to be done in these scenarios to actually kind of get this get the models to demonstrate this kind of behavior. And I think these kind of evaluations are kind of somewhere on the spectrum between the capability evaluations and propensity evaluations, where like this is kind of showing model tendencies in some situations, but the situations are designed to kind of elicit this kind of tendency, and so like it's kind of more in the direction of a capability evaluation than just kind of like deploying the model in normal situations and seeing what happens, because like in normal situations these behaviors don't kind of tend to come up. So I think it would be like a lot more concerning if models started kind of showing scheming behavior or blackmail or normal tasks. I think that would be like it would be quite concerning. But I think so far it's not something we have seen. So I think one of the things that we need to do is like to set up more realistic scenarios, maybe less contrived scenarios, where like there's still some incentive for the model to kind of show the bad behavior, but maybe like a more realistic incentive that might exist at deployment. So that's something I've been thinking about recently, and it's definitely there's definitely a lot to do here.
Nice. And last question I'll pick. The question says, I'll introduce the question. So several of the solutions within the field of AI alignment look like making several rounds of adjustment or iteration or feedback on top of a system that is not like perfectly designed, or like that might be like poorly designed in the beginning. And would it be better, preferable the approach of just like trying to encode initially aligned values or like trying to get them all right instead of adjusting on top of that?
So I guess I'm not sure what exactly this would look like. Like if you start with like a pre-trained base model that's basically just learned a lot of patterns from human text, and then that model is like it's not particularly aligned, and then like we provide a bunch of human feedback, and then it kind of like learns, for example, an AI assistant persona on top of that that's like helpful, honest, and harmless, and then like it becomes more aligned. And I guess like I think there's the question of like what is the starting point. I think if your starting point is like the model has just kind of learned a lot from human data, then that's not going to be very aligned. And then then you can like introduce human values in different ways, and it seems like kind of giving the model a lot of feedback about like what users want is like a relatively effective way. And then you also have like model learning like a constitution and getting feedback on like whether it's following those principles. And yeah, I think there are different trade-offs there. Like with human feedback, there's this kind of the real risk the model will like just learn to say what human users or human readers want to hear, and like not necessarily kind of properly learning to like follow those values. So yeah, I think this is still a somewhat open problem.
Perfect. I think that's all we have time for. But thank you so much for everyone that attended the session. And thank you so much, Victoria. It was a great presentation.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for the great questions.